Imagine what governments can do, and the threat always exists, and it really does exist that one day the feds will move in and take away your money. They've done that in Latin American countries. I believe it was Argentina that literally just took all the savings accounts for all the people and said, we'll give you bonds in exchange for them, took them. Well, Cyprus is in a bind. They're trying to take a 10% clip on all of the bank accounts. Now they're cutting it down to only a certain amount, like something in the neighborhood of $30,000. I'm not sure, but we mentioned before, huge amounts of Russian money have gone into Cyprus because Cyprus is a tax haven. And I had a Cyprus company called Zvezda Media. Zvezda.
Who knew?
Who knew? Who knew? But they weren't confiscating anything. Cyprus is a nice little island, and everything's peaceful. But it may be they're trying to hit these Russian oligarchs who've got a lot of hot money in there, and a lot of it is probably ill-gotten, but it's billions of dollars.
Yes.
So if they start hitting that, maybe those Russian oligarchs will go someplace else with their money, and that will destroy the economy of Cyprus. So we'll see. It's more than meets the eye, and that Gazprom has said, look, it's such a little bit of money. If you want to help, we'll be glad to loan you the money. Just let us have rights to all the gas around your island.
Well, people are furious about it, and can you blame them? But it looks like the plan doesn't have enough votes to pass, and our Ephraim Graham has the story.
The tiny European country of Cyprus is in need of a bailout. Over the weekend, the European Union developed a plan to rescue the country, a €10 billion bailout package. But in return for the rescue loans, the nation will be required to confiscate up to 10% of everyone's savings account. The announcement caused an immediate uproar.
Why should they take our money? I do not understand this. We work and we deposit money for our own purposes, and they come to take our money? This is unfair, unfair.
Cyprus built up its economy in recent years by becoming an international financial center. But its banks invested heavily in Greece, and when Greece's finances fell apart, it hurt the banks in Cyprus badly.
When Greece defaulted, it was the case of one bad mushroom really damaging a very, very good mushroom.
The situation in Cyprus has raised concerns that other struggling nations might eventually try the tax on bank deposits.
This is something that will happen as a precedent for every other European country. All other countries right now, all their money in every bank is not safe.
It's also sparking fears of possible runs on the banks in the future as investors try to keep their money.
I have seen that the Spanish and Italian banks have lost massively this morning, partially up to 4%, which means there is a huge danger that money has been withdrawn.
European analysts don't expect bank runs elsewhere in Europe for now, but the government in Cyprus is still working to find a way to pay for a bailout that it needs to keep its bank system from facing a serious crisis. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Well, it's penny ante. I think that the GDP of Kansas is bigger than Cyprus, so I mean, it's not exactly a major player, but nevertheless, what this shows is what governments are willing to do, and that spooks investors. If you read some of this literature, they're always warning you the time will come when they confiscate your gold. You say, well, they never do that in America. Yes, they did. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt did just that. He declared the ownership of gold illegal and took away America's gold back in the early 1930s. So it has been done before. It can be done again. And governments can get very, very greedy. So there's some people that say maybe to locate offshore, but offshore where? You go to Cyprus, and that isn't exactly the best safe haven. Well, while Europe faces another financial crisis, President Obama will soon be in Israel talking about another global threat, Iran's nuclear program. Lee Webb has that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's Lee.
The president leaves for Israel today, Pat, his first trip there as president. He will also visit the West Bank and Jordan, and his trip comes, of course, at a critical time in the Middle East. Jennifer Wishon has the story from the White House.
It's taken President Obama more than 4 years to visit America's closest ally in the Middle East, and Israelis have noticed. According to one Israeli newspaper poll, nearly 70% of them have an unfavorable or hostile attitude towards the president. Meanwhile, a Gallup poll shows American sympathy for Israel is at its highest level in more than 2 decades.
If you're Benjamin Netanyahu, what do you want to talk to President Obama about?
Right now, about Iran. That is his main concern. It is the biggest an actual existential threat to the nation of Israel.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that in his famous speech at the UN last fall, that the red line, the point by which if Iran crosses it, Israel will no longer have the ability to stop Iran's nuclear program. That red line is approaching sometime between spring and summer. Well, here we are.
American intelligence indicates there's more time, but Iran continues to press ahead, even cozying up to North Korea.
Iran has seen North Korea test a nuclear warhead, and its scientists were there at the launch, which means this relationship between Iran and North Korea is very close.
The first thing the president will visit when he touches down on Israeli soil is the nation's missile defense system called the Iron Dome, a signal, the White House says, of the president's commitment to the security of Israel.
The president decided against addressing Israel's Knesset. Instead, on Thursday, he'll talk to a group of Israeli college students at the Jerusalem Convention Center. White House officials say he's eager to talk to them about America's support for Israel and the future of U.S.-Israel relations. Meanwhile, policy experts will be watching closely to see if the president's trip is heavier on optics or substance.
I mean, you can't just go visit the Western Wall and pray and visit the shrine of the book and, go to Bethlehem and do the tourist sites, eat a falafel, and make everyone feel happier.
How big of a deal is it for the president of the United States to visit a foreign country?
Oh, it's an enormous symbol and signal to both the country that he visits and the countries around it.
The last thing the president will do before leaving Israel and the West Bank Friday is to visit the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. A White House official says the president hopes his visit brings attention to the persecution of Christians in the Middle East and the need to protect religious minorities. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the White House.
Pat, are you expecting anything to come from this trip?
No, I really don't, but I do think there'll be a lot of hoopla and it's celebrations. They've got thousands of police to secure against any terrorist activity, and they will roll out the red carpet for him, and he will be treated like a hero. But the majority, over 90% of the Israeli populace do not approve of President Obama. They don't believe he's a friend of Israel. And his actions have pretty much proved that. His rhetoric may be something different. And you'll hear a lot of rhetoric about how we support you, we've got your back, we've got this, that, and the other. But whether it'll actually come to pass remains to be seen. And I doubt very, very seriously if you're going to see any essential movement. I think his main thrust is going to be to strong-arm Netanyahu and say, don't attack Iran now. That'll be the message. Now, maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. Lee.
Well, tomorrow we will have a special report from Jerusalem on the president's arrival and the issues he will be facing on his visit to the Holy Land. Back in Washington, House Democrats have put together a budget for the government. Finally, it raises $1.2 trillion in new taxes over the next 10 years. The plan would bring in the money by getting rid of tax breaks for businesses as well as individuals. Democrats say their budget focuses on strengthening the economy and growing jobs, but House Republicans, as you might expect, say the plan isn't serious. The GOP says its plan would get rid of the federal deficit within a decade. Either side telling the truth here, Pat?
No. Well, certainly the Democrats are right. Lee, you remember from your history, President Roosevelt had a top aide whose name was Harry Hopkins. And Harry Hopkins was his political guru. He was like the Karl Rove of that day. And he said, here's the secret. Tax and tax and spend and elect and elect. That was their mantra. Tax and tax, spend and spend, elect and elect. And so as long as the fountain is open and the slush funds are rolling out to the people, then they will vote for those giving them the slush funds, who will be perceived as the Democrats. So that's their game. It's been that game since Harry Hopkins back in the mid-1930s, continues to be their game. But there are those who are saying, no, a great nation cannot bankrupt itself in order to buy votes. And that's the danger, bankruptcy, where we don't want to wind up like Greece. Lee?
Pat, Republican Senator Rand Paul is endorsing a pathway to citizenship for the nation's 11 million illegal immigrants. Paul's message is, if you wish to live and work in America, we will find a place for you. Paul's path to citizenship would not be easy. It includes several conditions, but he joins a growing number of Republicans who support immigration reform to broaden the party's appeal among Hispanics. It also comes as the Republican National Committee says it will spend $10 million this year alone to reach out to minorities. The RNC will use part of that money to send hundreds of party workers into Hispanic, Black, and Asian communities. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court is ready to decide if states can force people to prove they're U.S. citizens before registering to vote. Paul Strand has that story from Washington.
Opponents outside the Supreme Court said they're hopeful the justices will strike down Arizona's voting law because it requires more proof than would-be voters have to supply under the federal voter registration law.
This is about the basic right to vote. Arizona is trying to say no. They will not accept the federal mail voter registration form unless it is accompanied by additional documentation.
We joined the fight against Hitler and Nazism. And when we came back to the state of Arizona, we were not allowed to vote until 1948. And to this day, what goes on today to try to suppress voting, I mean, that really amazes me that this type of thing is still going on to this day.
But the man who defended Arizona's law Monday before the High Court and the man who wrote it say states must have a right to prove people really are eligible to vote.
It is the burden of the states to determine that all voters are eligible voters, and that means that they're citizens.
We know we have voting fraud. We've had many, many indictments in many states of irregularities and voter fraud. It's about time we step up to the plate and ensure that the right to vote is reserved for citizens of the United States.
If the court upholds Arizona's law, 12 other states are ready to pass similar tough voter laws. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Pat, it seems to me that the question for the Supreme Court comes down to this. Is it legal for an illegal immigrant to vote?
I think that's the right question. If they'll ask that question and phrase it that way, the answer is pretty clear. There's no question. But I understand Arizona has got a unique situation. They have hundreds of thousands of people in their state who are there illegally. And these people, the federal voter form says, are you a citizen? And you check yes. That's all you have to do. Are you a citizen? Yes. So what's the proof? You don't have to prove anything. Are you a citizen? Well, where's your birth certificate? Where's something? But that's all you have to do is check a form. And so the Arizona said, no, there are too many people living in this state who are not citizens. They've come across the border illegally, and they shouldn't be allowed to vote. So who's going to win? We really don't know. I think, folks, we've got to recognize that these Hispanics in our society are wonderful people. They're hardworking people. They're family people. They're all the things that you like. But nevertheless, they have come across our border illegally. So how do you rectify the situation? Well, I think intelligent people like Senator Rubio and Senator Rand Paul are saying, look, we've got to stop this a knee-jerk reaction against immigrants and begin to open the borders and open our arms. We are a nation of immigrants. Everybody came here from someplace else except the Indians. Everybody, or the quote Native Americans, everybody else came from somewhere beside here. And they're Hispanic people who've lived here since like the 1500s or 1600s. They predate the Anglo-Saxons that came in, or the Anglos, whatever, that came in later on from England. They've been here a long, long time, very distinguished, and they don't want to be lumped in with all these lawbreakers. So I think it's we open our eyes and recognize that these are wonderful people, and we cannot penalize them, but then it needs to be tough. You just cannot open your doors and say anybody wants to come in, get free medical, free health, free education, free this, that, and the other. It won't work. But I think wise heads are beginning to prevail in this debate, and I just hope they are successful. Lee?
Keeping your heart healthy could also help you ward off cancer. Researchers looked at more than 13,000 patients over 20 years and discovered that following the 7 steps for heart health can cut your cancer risk in half. Now, here are those 7 steps. Get active, control cholesterol, eat better, manage blood pressure, lose weight, reduce blood sugar, and stop smoking. The American Heart Association developed those 7 steps 3 years ago with the goal of reducing deaths from heart attack and stroke by 20% by the year 2020. Pat?
Well, Lee, I think we've been preaching. I think the most important step that you should take in fixing your heart is to watch the 700 Club, and you'll get all the tips you need as to how to be heart.
It's free.
It's free. Heart healthy.
Planned Parenthood is pushing to defeat an abortion bill being considered in North Carolina. Lawmakers there introduced the measure last week. It requires doctors to have admitting privileges at a nearby hospital to provide abortions, and requires doctors to stay on site until a woman is ready to go home after an abortion. Supporters say it's about keeping women safe, while critics believe it will limit access to abortions. Observers say some version of the bill could pass the state Senate and House and then head to the governor's office. Another Christian group has been booted from a college campus. This time, it's InterVarsity Christian Fellowship at Rollins College in Orlando, Florida. The college was trying to force InterVarsity to allow any student to be a leader in their group, even if they don't share InterVarsity's biblical beliefs. The same thing happened at Vanderbilt University and several other colleges. Rollins is revoking InterVarsity's student funding and campus access. Leaders say they will continue to serve students as an off-campus group. Well, you can always get the latest news from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.